Hi, good morning, guys. Here we are back with Stargirl and Leo, and we're going to see what happens after Leo found the Valentine from Stargirl in his book, right? And it was signed from Stargirl, which I think is like the cutest thing ever. So here we go, chapter 15, page 73. She gave everybody in school a card. That was my first thought. When I saw Kevin at school, I was about to ask him, but I pulled back. I waited until lunch. I tried to be casual, and I slipped it in with the only thing that mattered today, that the school was in mourning. They were sad. The game, the loss, the tomato. Oh yeah, incidentally, speaking of Stargirl, did you happen to get a card? He looked at me funny. She gave them to her homeroom, I heard. Yeah, I said, that's what I heard too, but was that all? Did she give them to everybody else? He shrugged. Not to me. Why? You get one? He was looking across the lunchroom, biting into his sandwich, yet I felt he was grilling me, asking me questions. I shook my head. Oh, no, just wondering. Actually, I was sitting on the card. It was in my back pocket of my jeans. Meanwhile, all the eyes in the lunchroom were on Stargirl. I think we half expected to see traces of red still clinging to her face from the tomato, right? She sat at her usual table with Dory Dilson and several other friends, and she seemed subdued. She seemed calm. She did not play her ukulele, and she did not play with her rat. She just ate and talked with the girls at her table. As the lunch period was ending, she got up, but did not head straight for the exit. Instead, she detoured into the direction of my table. I panicked. I jumped up, grabbed my stuff, and blurted, "Gotta go!" I left Kevin with his mouth hanging and took off. But not fast enough. Halfway to the door, I heard her behind me. Hi, Leo. My face got warm. I was sure every eye was turned to me. I was sure they could all see the card in my pocket, and I pretended to look at the clock. I pretended I was late for something, and I ran from the lunchroom. I lurked in the shadows. I snuck around in the shadows for the rest of the day. I went straight home after school, and I stayed in my room. I came out only for dinner. I told my parents I had a project to do. I paced. I walked back and forth. I lay on my bed and stared at the ceiling. I stared out the window, and I laid the card on my desk. I picked it up. I read it. I read it. I read it. I played Hi, Leo over and over in my head. I tossed darts at the corkboard on the back of my door, and my father called in. What's your project? Darts? I went out. I drove around in the pickup. I drove down her street, and at the last intersection before her house, I turned off. For hours, I laid under the sheet of moonlight. Her voice came through the night from the light from the stars. Hi, Leo. In the morning, it was a Saturday. Kevin and I went together to Archie's for the weekly meeting of the Loyal Order of the Stone Bone, right? The old guy with the cool house. There were about 15 of us, and we wore our fossil necklaces. Excuse me. Archie wanted to discuss the Eocene skull he was holding, but all that the others could talk about was the game. When they told Archie about the tomato, his eyebrows went up, but other than that, his face did not change. I thought, this is not news to him. He already knows. Archie spent the whole session that way, nodding and smiling and raising his eyebrows. We dumped our disappointment on him, and the devastation of the loss. He said very little, and when it was over, he looked down at the skull in his lap and patted it and said, well, this fellow here lost his game too. He was winning for 10 million years or so, but then the early grasses started to grow up around him, and he found himself in a different league. Right, he's talking about the skull, like the dead human head in his hand. He hung in there as well as he could, and he scored his points, but he kept falling further and further behind. The opposition was better, quicker, keener. In the championship game, our boy got annihilated. Not only didn't he show up for class the next day, he never showed up, period, and they never saw him again. Archie lifted the snouted, fox-sized skull until it was side by side with his own face. A good minute passed, and he said nothing, inviting us on our own thoughts. Faces staring at faces, staring at faces. Tens of millions of years of faces in a living room in a place called Arizona. What would that be like to be in a room full of dead skulls? It'd be interesting. Chapter 16, page 76. Sorry, I forgot about page numbers. Monday, lunch. This time I stayed put when Stargirl came toward my table on her way out. My back was to her. I could see Kevin's eyes following her, widening as she came closer. Then his eyes stopped, and his mouth was sliding toward a wicked grin, and it seemed like everything stopped. But the clink of pans in the kitchen and the back of my neck was on fire. "You're welcome," I heard her say, almost sing. I thought, what? But then I knew what, and I knew what I had to do. I knew I had to turn around and speak to her, and I knew she was going to stand there until I did. This was silly. This was childish. This being terrified of her. What was I terrified of anyways? What was I terrified of anyway? I turned. I felt heavy, as if I were moving through water. As if I were confronting much more than a 10th grade girl with an unusual name. I faced the gaudy sunflower on her canvas bag. It looked hand-painted. And at last my eyes fell into hers, and I said, "Thanks for the card." Her smile put the sunflower to shame, and she walked off, meaning she had a beautiful smile. Kevin was grinning and wagging his head. "She's in love." "Bull," I said. "She's mucho in love. She's goofy, that's all." The bell rang and we gathered our stuff and left. I wobbled through the rest of the day. A baseball bat could not have hit me harder than that smile did. Page 77. I was 16 years old. In that time, how many thousands of smiles had been aimed at me? So why did this one feel so like the first? After school, my feet carried me toward her homeroom. I was trembling. I was shaking. My stomach had flies. I had no idea what I was going to do if I saw her. I only knew I couldn't not go, like he had to go. She wasn't there. I hurried through the halls. I ran outside. And the buses were loading. Cars were revving, and hundreds of kids were scattering. For months, she had been everywhere, and now she was nowhere. I heard her name. Her name. The same 2 syllables, the same 8 letters that I'd been hearing all year, and suddenly the sound struck my ear with a ping of pure silver. I drifted sideways to overhear. A group of girls was chattering towards the bus. Here we go. "When?" "Today, after school, just now." "I don't believe it. I don't believe it took so long." "Kicked off? Are they allowed?" "Sure, why not? It's not her school. I would have kicked her off long ago. It was treason. Good riddance." I knew what they were talking about. It had been rumored for days that Stargirl had been kicked off the cheerleading squad. "Hi, Leo!" A chorus of girls' voices calling my name. I turned. And they were in front of the sun, page 78. I shaded my eyes. They sang in unison, "Starboy!" They laughed, and I waved and hurried home. I could never have admitted it, but I was thrilled. I was excited. Her house was 2 miles from mine, behind a little 10-store shopping center. Archie had told me where, and I walked. I didn't want to ride. I wanted to be slow about it. I wanted to feel myself getting closer step by step, feel the tension rising like fizz on a soda bottle. I did not know what to do if I saw her. I knew only that I was nervous, afraid. I was more comfortable with her as history than a person. I was more comfortable with her as history than as a person. Suddenly, intensely, I wanted to know everything about her. I wanted to see her baby pictures, and I wanted to watch her eating breakfast, wrapping a gift, sleeping. Since September, she had been a performer, unique and outrageous on the high school stage. She was the opposite of cool, and she held nothing back. From her decorated desk to her oratorical speech to her performance on the football field, she was there for all to see. And yet now I feel as I had not been paying attention. I felt I had missed something very important. She had lived on Palo Verde. That's the name of the street. For a person so different, her house was surprisingly ordinary, at least by Arizona standards. A single story, pale adobe, clay red pipe tile roof, and not a blade of grass in the small front yard. You should go look up what the houses in Arizona look like. and you'll totally know what they're talking about. Adobe is a way of building houses where it looks like it's made out of like clay or something or dirt. And then the tiled roofs, they have red roofs and they're really pretty. So you should go look up a picture. Anyway, back to this. And not a blade of grass in the small front yard, but rather beryl and prickly pear cacti and clusters of stones, right? Those rock and cactuses, which is pretty typical in Arizona. It was dark, as I had intended when I got there. I walked up and down the other side of the street, and it occurred to me that I might be mistaken for a prowler, right? Someone who's doing a bad thing. So I walked around the block. I stopped at Roma Delight for a slice of pizza, and I gulped down only half of it. I hurried back out. Couldn't relax when their house was not in sight. Couldn't relax when it was. At first, it was enough to just see the house. Then I began to wonder if she was inside. I wondered what she could be doing. Light came from every window I could see, and there was a car in the driveway. The longer I hung around, the closer I wanted to be. I crossed the street and practically dashed past the house. As I went by, I scooped up a stone from the front yard. I went up the street, turned, and looked at her house in the distance. I whispered to the salt-sprinkled sky, That's where Stargirl Caraway lives, and she likes me. I headed back towards the house. The street and the sidewalks were deserted. The stone was warm in my hand. This time I walked slowly as I approached. I felt strange, my eyes fixed on a triangle of light in a curtained window. I saw a shadow on a yellow wall, and it seemed to be drifting, footless, into the light. Suddenly, the front door opened. I dived behind the car in the driveway and crouched by the rear fender. I heard the door close, and I heard steps. The steps matched the movement of a long shadow cast down the driveway. My breath stopped. The shadow stopped. I felt both ridiculous and weirdly perfectly placed, as if crouching by that car was precisely what life had in store for me at that moment. Page 80. Her voice came from beyond the shadow. Remember when you followed me into the desert that day after school? Absurdly, I debated whether to answer, as if doing so would, give me away? I leaned into the smooth metal fender. It never occurred to me to stand, to show myself. Hours seemed to pass before finally I croaked, Yes? Why did you turn around and go back? Her tone was casual, as if she held conversations every night with people crouching behind the car in the driveway. I don't remember, I said. Were you afraid? No, I lied. I wouldn't have let you get lost, you know. I know. A little shadow detached itself from the larger one. It came toward me, wavering over the pebbled driveway. It had a tail, and it wasn't a shadow. It was the rat, Cinnamon. Cinnamon stopped at the tip of one of my sneakers, and he stood looking up at me. He put his front paws on top of my sneaker, and he nosed the laces. Are you getting acquainted with Cinnamon? Sort of. Are you lying? Sort of. Are you afraid of rats? Sort of. Do you think I'm cute? If you say sort of, I'll tell Cinnamon to bite you. Yes. Yes, what? I think you're cute. I thought of adding sort of just to be funny, but I didn't. Do you think Cinnamon is cute? The rat had climbed fully onto my sneaker now, and I could feel his weight. I wanted to shake him off. His tail spilled onto the driveway. No comment, I said. Oh my, hear that, Cinnamon? No comment. He doesn't want people to know he thinks you're cute. I think you're getting a little carried away, I said. I certainly hope so, she said. Nothing's more fun than being carried away. Would you like to carry Cinnamon away for the night? He loves sleepovers. No, thank you. Oh, her voice was mock pouty. Are you sure? He's no trouble. He hardly takes up any room. All you have to do is feed him mini wheat or 2 grapes, and he won't poop on your rug, will you, Cinnamon? Go ahead, stand up and tell him you won't. Stand up, Cinnamon. And Cinnamon stood on my sneaker. His eyes shone like black pearls. Doesn't he have the cutest ears? Who notices a rat's ears? I looked, and she was right. Yeah, I said, I guess he does. Tickle him behind his ears. He loves that. I swallowed hard, and I reached down with the tips of my 2 fingers and tickled the tiny furry spaces behind the rat's ears. Page 82. I guess he enjoyed it. He didn't move, and then surprising myself, I moved one fingertip in front of his nose and he licked me. It never occurred to me that rats do that. His tongue was half the size of my little fingernail, and I would have guessed it was rough, like a cat's, but it wasn't. It was smooth. And then he was no longer on my foot, he was on my shoulder. I yelped, and I tried to swat him off, but he dug into my shirt with his fingernails. Meanwhile, Stargirl was cracking up. I could see the shadow shaking. "Let me guess," she said. "Cinnamon jumped onto your shoulder?" "You got it," I said. "And you're thinking about how rats are supposed to go for people's throats?" "I wasn't," I said, "but now that you mention it..." I clamped my hands around my neck, and I felt something in my ear. Whiskery. I yelped again. "He's eating my ear!" Stargirl laughed some more. "He's nuzzling you." It's like what animals do when they put their nose in your face. "He likes you, especially your ears. He never meets an ear he doesn't love. By the time he's done, your ears of yours will be clean as a whistle, especially if there's some leftover peanut butter in it." I could feel the tiny tongue mopping up the crevices of my left ear. "It tickles." I felt something else. "I feel teeth." "He's just scraping something off for you. You must have something crusty in there. Have you washed your ears lately?" "None of your business." "Sorry, I didn't mean to get personal." "I forgive you." All was quiet for a while, except for the snuffing in my ear. I could hear the rat breathing. His tail dropped onto my front shirt pocket. "Do you want to confess now?" "Confess what?" I said. "That you're actually starting to like having a rodent poking around in your ear?" I smiled, I nodded, and dislodged the rat's nose for a moment. "I confess." More silence, tiny breathing in my ear. "Well," she said at last, "we have to go now. Say goodnight, Cinnamon." "No," I thought, "don't go." "I still have another ear," I said. "If he does that one, he'll never want to leave you, and I'll be jealous. Come on, Cinnamon, time for beddy-bye." Cinnamon went on snuffing. "He's not coming, is he?" "Nope." "Then just take hold of him and put him on the ground." I did so, and as soon as I put the rat down, he scooted under the tailpipe and out of sight, on the other side of the car. The shadow withdrew, and I heard the front door open. Light gushed out. "Night, Leo." "Night," I called back. Page 84. I didn't want to leave. I wished I could curl up right there on the driveway and go to sleep, but I had been crouching for a long time, and it was a chore to stand. I was halfway home before I could walk right. They like each other. All right, so go do your vocabulary and your summaries, and we'll be back later with chapter 17. Bye, guys.